Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of my podcast, The Cybersecurity Bridge. For those very few of you who've never seen the Cybersecurity Bridge podcast, each episode is broken into three sections. In the first section, we talk about the present of a particular area of cybersecurity. In the second section, we talk about the future of that area of cybersecurity. And the third section is the Cybersecurity Bridge, which we talk about how we get from the present to the future. I love all my guests, but I'm really glad to have an old friend on, Ken Elefant. And Ken, please introduce yourself to our audience.
Thank you, John. Good to see you again. And thanks for having me. So my name is Ken Elefant. I'm the managing director at Sorenson Capital. At Sorenson Capital, we have two funds. We have an early stage fund and a growth fund. The early stage fund is a $150 million venture fund, and the growth fund's a $300 million fund. And all we focus on is security and enterprise software.
Great, thank you. And as my audience can tell, we're shaking it up. We've had a lot of technology discussions, product discussions in the past, and now we're talking about those things, but maybe with an investment context. Now, before we get into our general discussion, Ken, are you, Ken Elefant, ready to play cybersecurity trivia?
Oh, I'm so ready, John.
That's good. And so I chose a question. It's a hard one, maybe hard, but it's for you specifically. So the largest venture capital round in any cybersecurity company was $1 billion into Wiz. Now I'm going to read you four others, and you tell me what the lowest round of those four was. They were all significant, but what was the lowest? Was it Ninja One, Kiteworks, Sierra, Armis, or Island? Which one had the lowest amount invested in a single round?
Kiteworks.
Like I said, hard question. It was Armis with 200 million. Each of those rounds was over 200 million. And Ken, I'm an old man, but I remember the days when like 8 million was a lot in a round. So
me too. I've been doing this for 26 years. It is really, really interesting to see what is happening in the market.
It is. And with that tees up our first question. And that is, as a cybersecurity investor, what do you think of the current state of the market? What do you think of the current state of cybersecurity?
The state of the market from the buyer's point of view is that there is a lot of different technology vendors that are out there, and it's very, very confusing. So for my friends that are CISOs or security execs at large organizations, I think it is extremely difficult to break out and really understand what are the startups that you want to focus on, what are the platform companies that you want to focus on. So that is the state. And the reason that that's happening is because infrastructure software inside of the enterprise has moved so fast. You now have a organization that needs to move at the speed of cloud, and you also need to move at the speed of AI. And your developers are not going to stop. As a CISO or security exec, what you need to do is you need to deliver business value, and that's really difficult.
It sure is, and we're going to get into that. And one thing you mentioned actually really tees up my second question, and that is platformization. We see so much of that. We could see it coming years ago, but it's really accelerated now. What do you think of platformization, and is that good or bad for innovation in the market?
Platformization is bad for innovation if there are 100 companies in each little individual space, because there's only so many buyers. For example, when I'm talking about platformization, it is that most enterprises want to buy from as few vendors as possible. And so there's this question of, do I buy best of breed, or do I buy an individual platform company that has a lot of different solutions? They may not be the best solutions if I'm a platform company, but a lot of enterprises are okay with good enough. It's difficult as a startup to target large enterprises with a single solution unless you're extremely differentiated.
Yeah, and to me, the platforms, I get it. I get the one throat to choke kind of thing. But if you're a large enterprise, and as you said, if you're doing a lot of innovation on the business side, a lot of technical deployment on the business side, I don't think the platforms ever catch up, which means there's room along the edges for innovation. So if if you believe that to
No
be
doubt.
true, go
Yeah,
ahead.
yeah. No doubt. I mean, obviously that's my business. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to find the technology startups that are best of breed in certain spaces that are going to be, that may today be small markets, but they're going to be rapidly growing markets. So for example, one of our trends 8 years ago was that this cloud revolution really is going to move from testing into production. And if so, security, the entire security stack around cloud is going to change. And so we were early investors in CloudKnox, which did permissions management. And so if you think of that Capital One breach, probably about 8 years ago now, that was what CloudKnox was there to stop. And the large vendors could not move fast enough to solve that problem. And that's why companies like CloudKnox were successful. Now part of Microsoft.
And so moving that forward to the present, what are those markets today that you're saying I'm betting on because I think in the next 2 to 3 years they're going to explode?
Okay, so there's many trends that are happening today. So certainly AI is moving from test into production as well. And that does mean that there is going to need to be security around AI. And the biggest part of the security aspect that I think needs to be protected is the data management side. So think of this as a new market for data leak prevention, DLP. There are unfortunately way too many startups that are going after this space. And honestly, if I was an enterprise buyer, I would first check out what my platform vendor has in the space and then do a real POV of a couple of startups versus the platform vendor.
So kind of a question in a similar vein, but are you talking, is part of your job to talk to CISOs and practitioners and ask them, where are you struggling and what are the gaps in your portfolio or in your security technology stack that you just don't see viable solutions for?
Yeah. So one of the best sources of investment ideas for us is from our friends that are chief security officers or security execs at large and mid-sized organizations. When we ask them, what is the key problems that you have? And is this a people problem inside of your organization? Is it a process problem? Or is it a technology problem? And then that will help us inform us on what areas we think could be interesting for us to develop a deeper thesis on and try and find the best startup that's in the space, or we'll just partner with an entrepreneur and ideate it from the beginning.
And as part of that, are you looking at what's already been out there and maybe some of the weaknesses in the existing?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I'll give you a real life example. The last security investment that we did is a company called Strongest Layer. It does.
Know them.
Do you know them? Okay, good.
Yes.
Yeah. So they do email security. So at first blush, you might be like, why do we need email security? Well, what's happening in the market? The attackers are using AI to do spear phishing. And they're not just doing one or two spear phishing. With Gen AI, they can do extremely scalable spear phishing. And unfortunately, the large vendors, whether it's Proofpoint or Mimecast or others, are not set up to handle all this spear phishing capability because it is brand new data, brand new patterns, and so on. And so that's why a startup needs to exist. And I also think, to your question about platformization, what Strongest Layer has done is they built a complete platform. It not only has the security, but it has the training, it has the URL filtering, it has the content filtering all built in. So it is an all-in-one solution for enterprises and they're going to start with the mid-size enterprise.
That's it. So that leads me to another thing is, our industry has I'd say a perception problem in that we kind of look at the world and think every company is Goldman Sachs. Every company is Walmart. They have enterprise class security people. They have the resources. How do you look at different market segments and make calls or make investment decisions based on where the mid-market is versus the large enterprises where certain industries are?
Yeah, completely agree with that. So what we try and do is we try and work with our entrepreneurs and really understand what is their ideal customer profile. And that can be based on size of company. It could be, to your point, the sophistication of the buyer. It could be what is in their current stack, as an example. So that's the way that we look at the market opportunity. And to your point, I think entrepreneurs too often think about selling to large enterprises too early in their evolution as a company.
They do. I totally agree. They do. And then when you get into actual enterprises, they have so many requirements that you didn't anticipate. And that becomes what you have to, what your challenge is to keep up with that.
It can be super distracting, and it's also very hard to reject a request, even though you know it's not going to be replicable to the other global 10,000 companies.
That's right. Especially when salespeople are pushing you and saying, I can close this deal for 10 million if you just add this feature. And I've been there. So let's move on to the future. It seems to me that right now, I mean, with all of the AI talk, and AI was front and center at RSA, and certainly at Black Hat, I wasn't there, but I've heard. But it seems like there's a pushback on AI now, that the market's saying, wait a minute, maybe we don't need as much, or maybe we're over-promising. Where are you on sort of where we are with AI?
So, John, like I said, I think that it really is going to be a problem for enterprises. Enterprises really are putting these tests that they've done with AI into production. That's happening. And you can see it through the numbers that NVIDIA has. People are not just playing around with AI. They're actually getting real value from it.
Sure.
Now, that means that if that happens, they need to control it. And the question is at what layer do you need to control it? I think that enterprises are going to go slow in terms of really pushing adoption into production until they understand how AI is actually working, what their agents are doing inside the enterprise, what systems these agents have access to, what data these systems have action to. So for the startups, that means that they're going to need to get revenue in the shorter term, and it will be a scramble to get to those customers that are really fast to adopt.
Back to a question I asked before, are you seeing any trends based on industry in terms of adoption and opportunity?
Well, in financial services, certainly AI is getting adopted. You can see that if you're going to accept or reject a loan, AI can go out and grab a lot of the information that you needed in the past. You can kind of think of that as like a next-gen RPA, like UiPath. It's like a next-gen version of that, but it just makes it so easy for the person inside of the enterprise to make the decision if the agent can gather all the data. But at the end, there is, I think, going to need to be a human in the loop on important decisions. I think that AI is going to be implemented in almost every area where a human is on a keyboard. If the problem is deterministic, it's going to be really difficult to put AI there. If it's data gathering, if it is helping on processes, that's where AI will work. So for example, I would not want AI to decide what maintenance American Airlines is going to do on their airplane. That is deterministic. You need to have that right. And if you get that wrong, that's a huge problem. What I'm seeing in the enterprise around security, there's the security solutions today are horrible. Every enterprise, if you look at vulnerabilities, they have way too many vulnerabilities. AI can clean that up. It's not going to be perfect, but it can clean it up. And that's real value add. And it's just going to get better over time.
I agree. With vulnerability management in particular, that's one where I think the attack surface is growing faster than the existing technologies can keep up. And so understanding the vulnerabilities, understanding the exposures, prioritizing based on context, it's a tremendous challenge. And even though there's a lot of investment in that area and innovation, I just haven't seen the solutions really come to fruition yet. So that leads me to the question is,
Yeah.
I mean, if you think of Andreessen and software eats the world, is software eating the world at a pace that security can't keep up with?
Um, there's always going to be this cat and mouse game, John, and security is always going to be, unfortunately, a little behind the curve. You're always going to see breaches. Now, our opportunity, the reason that I love this business is that we're going to enable entrepreneurs to solve this problem that you're talking about. On the vulnerability side, we can get more autonomous. I mean, this is exactly our thesis when we invested in VulnCheck. You do not want to have your people in a very manual fashion trying to figure out what vulnerabilities, what exploits make sense to you as an enterprise. You want to have that be autonomous and you want it to fit into your security platform the way you have it. So think of that as, Recorded Future was which was bought for $2.6 billion by MasterCard. That's kind of, in my opinion, a legacy way to handle vulnerabilities. I think there's a more modern way, to your point.
Yeah, I think so too. Certainly threat intelligence is part of that, and that's Recorded Future, but understanding context and really a CISO's job is to put that into the business, a business lens. And so we can't fix everything, which are the things we have to fix based on our business mission. So totally agree. Part of security complexity, though, is lots and lots of companies, and I'm sure you see it too, throwing up their hands. I can't do this anymore. I need to go to a service provider. Yeah. We just saw Red Canary get purchased by Zscaler. So what's your perspective as an investor on managed services for security, and then also as a market observer?
Yeah. So from my perspective, I think that unfortunately we definitely have a talent shortage of really good security people inside of mid-sized enterprises for sure. So if I am a security exec at a mid-sized enterprise and I don't feel like I have the right talent, I definitely should be outsourcing to one of these service providers. And the way that I view that is it's great. We have little startups that partner with these service providers and let them create their own security stack that's perfectly built for their target customers. So I view this outsourcing as a trend. We've got several companies that are going after the MSP market, the MSSP market, and so on, like Evo Security and Identity.
I'm glad you brought up identity because we also saw Palo Alto buy CyberArk recently. Years ago, Ken, I mean, 15 years ago, CISOs were saying to me, there's no more perimeter, and therefore the new perimeters are identity and data. And you mentioned data. There was another announcement today with CrowdStrike buying Onum. Is that Onum? Yeah, for $290 million. So what are you looking at those areas specifically, or are they sort of an adjunct to things you're looking at?
Oh, identity is a huge thesis for us. And unfortunately, it is one of these spaces that keep on giving. So back in the day, I was an investor in Venafi, which was, really on the forefront of machine-to-machine identity. And more recently, we're investors in a company called Andromeda. But just like you said, John, there is no perimeter anymore. With cloud, with AI, with all of the interactions that you're doing with third parties, the only way to control access is by really understanding identity. And it's both machine identity, it is human identity, it is agent identity. And that's why I think you need a whole new platform in identity management. And I see that there's going to be an opportunity to replace these large companies of the past if these large companies don't execute quickly enough. CyberArk is a great company, but I do think that PAM is changing immensely. I think visibility on identity is changing. I think user access reviews is changing. I think onboarding and offboarding of identities is changing. And a new system needs to be there. Hence the investment in Andromeda.
Yeah, great answer. We used to say that identity is the area of security that everyone owns and no one owns, and everyone drags their feet on upgrading. And so maybe AI can help us, I don't know, re-engineer identity so that it's not as siloed, as it's not as balkanized as it is today. But what do you think?
Completely, because it's gotten so complicated, you can't take a rules-based approach to anymore. So every system is getting touched by all these different types of identities. A management system around identity needs to really understand the context of each of these interactions and make a just-in-time decision or allow a just-in-time decision if something looks out of whack.
Ken, let's transition to the cybersecurity bridge, how we get from the present to the future. And everything we talked about demands data access. So API access, we need access to different data, but vendors play fast and loose with that. So they don't necessarily open their APIs, or they open some APIs. All the data is in different formats. Do we need more standardization, or do we need something to happen there to really make this next generation of API connectivity, make it happen?
So, John, that would be nirvana. I think, I've been doing this venture investing for 26 years, and ever since day one, we were always talking about how all the security companies should work together and create a mesh and allow data to flow between the vendors, as an example. Sadly, that's nirvana, and I don't think that's ever going to happen in our lifetimes. So the forcing function, unfortunately, is on our friends that are security execs. And what I recommend for these security execs is to have one key person inside of your organization really in charge of understanding what data is being accessed by what systems. And then they need to go and test out whether their platform vendor or, maybe one or two startups, and do a great POV comparing which one is going to work more effectively inside of their enterprise. But it is, we can't control the large vendors, and it's going to be chaos. So the onus is on us.
As much as I scream at them, Ken, that's the truth. I've been trying for years, but I'm going to piggyback on what you just said. I think that we've talked about the security skill shortage for years and years and years. I've written about it. I've done research with ISC2 and ISSA. It seems to me that one of the biggest positions coming up, or the most important positions, is a security architect who starts to understand AI and understands governance and understands business and understands all this technology. Do you see the same thing coming?
Completely. I think that the security architect or the security engineer who understands what each of the products are really good at and also can figure out what the gaps are is one of the key people inside of the enterprise. I mean, obviously, everybody in security is absolutely critical, but this person is the one, because the infrastructure stack is changing so quickly on the IT side. They're the ones that can really invent the new security stack, and it will change. Any security exec that is not changing their security stack over the next few years, I think is going to be way behind and they're at huge risk.
I agree. I think just about every layer, excuse me, of this stack is in play, which creates opportunity, chaos, everything. Um, as a VC, what's your perspective on regulations? So we've seen SEC changes, we've seen NIS2 in Europe. Uh, AI is going to make a big impact in regulations. We've seen like the Colorado regulations and again the EU. How do you look at that and look for opportunity and look for market growth or new markets?
Yeah, I think regulation, unfortunately, is inevitable. I think that it actually comes from a good place, but whenever it's implemented, there are always lots and lots of issues around it. So it's just a burden that every enterprise needs to take note of. And there are solutions that make it a lot easier. So compliance is also one of our key theses. We want to make compliance super easy for every enterprise. Um, and when you are compliant, one of my pet peeves is that you should have a lot better security over time. And so I love compliance companies that make enterprises more secure. We just backed the old founders of Archer and a new company called Smart Suite, and this is exactly their thesis.
The old boy Archers, that's a blast from the past, but was extremely successful, especially in highly regulated companies. Um, Ken, I'm doing some research now. I'm doing a very deep dive on healthcare. And we talked about technology innovation. It's unbelievable in healthcare in terms of AI for diagnostics, AI for administration. And then you've got wearable technologies, Internet of Medical Things, you've got um, remote access or remote monitoring, telehealth. Do you believe, or do you look at different industry opportunities and kind of related to that, do you believe cybersecurity remains a horizontal practice across all industries, or do we get more vertical specialization in technology and skills?
In some industries, it should be more and more verticalized. So you brought up one, the healthcare industry. Unfortunately, security does need to get more and more verticalized there. The other industries that need to be verticalized is industrial security. So if you're a power plant, you're going to be using a very different set of security tools than a Procter and Gamble, as an example. So that does mean that there is opportunities for startups. And the question as a venture investor is, well, what could the outcome be over time? And what I like to see is, there's companies like Palantir that really just started in the government. Do you have the ability over time to go from a vertical to multiple verticals over time?
You absolutely do. And we can talk offline sometime about healthcare because what I'm learning is very frightening. I'll put it that way. Um, I did some other recent research, and it was really kind of in the vulnerability and exposure area. And I like to do, especially now that I'm semi-retired, I do more qualitative research. So I talked to about a dozen CISOs. What they said was consistent, and that was the issues weren't really technology, they were people and process. How does that, and we know from working in security for years that that's often the case. And how does that impact you as an investor? Because sometimes people don't need another technology widget. They just need to use what they have more effectively. So how do you consider that?
Yeah. So what I always try and do when we're investing in a company is put myself in the shoes of a buyer. And that's why I said at the very beginning of the show, if you think about security, it is people, it is process, and it is technology. And startups that do really well really empathize and understand the other parts of the solution that need to happen. And so it is not, to your point, just coming up with a interesting technology widget and hoping that it will save the world, because it does not. So the companies that have made really, really good progress, and I think about this well, is companies like Wiz. Their product was extremely easy to use. It was easy to explain. It was easy to show dashboards, and it really had excellent efficacy. And so too many startups, I think, focus too much on the actual technology approach and not about the holistic system. And that is, to your point before, why so many more companies are moving to outsource services. They could be MSPs, they could be MSSPs, because they want them to handle the people in the process and part of the technology.
I used to have this test that I would do when I was an analyst. I would say to a startup, okay, pretend I'm the CISO of the company you're trying to sell. Tell me how you add value. And they'd often go into feature functionality. They really didn't understand what the CISO did. And so the ones that did, generally they succeeded. The ones that didn't struggled. So I
Yeah,
completely,
the CISO's job has changed over the last
yes.
10
Yeah.
plus years. Instead of just talking about vulnerabilities and malware, they are now they have a seat on the board, and they are being asked about risk. They're being asked about metrics. They're being asked about budget, and they're being asked about where this goes. And the CISOs really need to enable business functions today, rather than being the Dr. No that they've been in the past. And that transition is definitely happening.
Yes, like 15 years ago, the CISO was the really smart guy who started his career as the checkpoint administrator, and now it's a business function. And actually, that change makes it harder to recruit and harder to train those people because they do have to have some technical chops. But we're seeing that too. So let me
Or John, I
go
mean,
ahead.
some of them definitely need technical chops, but they also can get someone on their staff that's really good at understanding the technology changes, because one person can't do everything inside of an enterprise.
Yeah, that's
So
that
I do think
security
that
architect we were talking about.
exactly, and I think that the best organizations understand how to build a security group, and there's not one size fits all.
Absolutely, Ken. So we're out of time, but I'm going to ask you the question I ask every guest, and that is, if there's one piece of advice you would give, and I guess that's to security practitioners, CISOs, other investors, whatever you want to do, what's that one piece of advice?
The one piece of advice is, the technology stack is changing. How are you set up to address that technology stack? We talked about one potential way of doing it, which is assign one person to the AI problem as an example, and have that person compare the legacy stacks and do proof of values with one or two startups, and really do a great comparison and make sure that those little startup companies have a way to integrate with your current systems. But having the person inside of your organization that is responsible, that's going to get promoted when they do a really good job, or get fired when they don't really succeed in moving the organization, is the problem. I see too often inside of enterprises that there's not one throat to choke.
True. And I would just add, let the business requirements drive the technology changes. Kind of obvious, but I thought I'd state it. But Ken Elefant, thank you so much for participating. You're a great guest. And for everyone else, please stay tuned. I'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode of the Cybersecurity Bridge. Ken, take care.
Thank you, John. Have a good one.
You too.